audience, and ways that you in your career and at Little Rock are really looking to engage non-traditional audiences and some of the ways you approach that.
First, I call them unexposed audiences because I don't know, I feel like when you call me or call someone non-traditional, you put them in a category, right? But if I'm unexposed to the National Park Service or city parks, if I'm unexposed to a certain environment until you expose me, then I learn about what you have to offer. And so looking at that, I call us, well, I say unexposed audience, so that's number one we'll start with. And number two, looking at, first we need to look at our human resources, and that's our employees, and looking at their individuality.
Mm-hmm.
What best practices are we offering them? How are we training them? How are we exposing them? All of that's important. Looking at their profession and what their needs are. And are we really addressing their needs? Those are the things I look at. And then we look at the community that we're in. What are some of the things that's going on in the community? Right now here in Little Rock, education, school board, there's a big crisis going on here in the education system. How are we supporting that? How are we supporting communities, impoverished communities? How are we addressing that? How are we looking at community mobilization? How do we mobilize the communities and prepare them? How do we prepare our staff? All of those are the things that I look at as far as relevant and relevancy. Well, that's very important for communities, making those connections with the communities for them to feel that we are relevant. And it's important to look at what their needs are. Are we relevant to them? And how do we become relevant? Looking at community-driven programs, looking at how do we consciously engage the community? How do we become socially inclined in the community and become an asset? Those are the things that we should look at.
You mentioned one of the efforts that you're working on with the social conscience gatherings. Are there other examples? Carol Shively, our Civil Rights Program Coordinator for the Park Service, had mentioned an After November program that you're doing, and also some civil rights training courses for teachers that I think could be excellent examples of developing some of the skills and working with the community to have some of those conversations. Could you tell us a little bit more about those efforts?
In November last year, we hosted a social conscious gathering, and it was not, I tell you, it was not a conference. It was a gathering of people from across the world, across the country, including Ireland, including Northern Ireland. So we had an international component as well. And we came together to address social issues. What I was just talking about, impoverished communities, root shock. Root shock is when people are displaced from their communities. We call it social and emotional recovery. We address community mobilization. But these people, we come together to talk about these social issues, but also looking at social justice and solutions and how they will go back to their respective communities in addressing that. Looking at the religious divide, looking at faith and activism. That was in November. So now what we're looking at, we're calling it Beyond November, because we are continuing that dialogue that we hosted in November. So Beyond November, we're continuing that conscious engagement and continue to talk about the social issues that we're concerned about. People are saying, we're looking at Black Lives Matter. Well, I call it the Black experience. So we can talk about the Black experience. We could talk about the color of law. Actually, the FBI has signed up to participate in Beyond November to talk about the color of law. The American Indian Movement has signed up to talk about their issues. Upcoming in August, we have Gary Davis from the movie House of Cards that will be participating to talk about social issues in the Native American community, because we all are part of this story. The story belongs to all of us, and we all encounter issues of social justice issues. From there, we also implementing what we call our Civil Rights Teachers Institute, and this is a 5.5-day program. And this Teachers Institute is a vehicle that affords maybe 25 educators from across the country to experience immersion experiences of civil rights, looking at the Constitution, looking at theater of oppress, which is a form of popular education on education for liberation, looking at critical and analytical thinking, to strengthen skills of observation, dialogue, and group interaction. So we do that under the press, and we have 2 facilitators to come in, and that's almost a week-long project.
Mm-hmm. This is just incredible work, and I think the timing of it is so important to where we are sort of in our country right now. One of the questions that we got beforehand was from Judy Janaic, who's the superintendent of Minidoka National Historic Site and Hagerman Fossil Beds National Monument. And I think related to sort of how I conceptualize civil rights through to the Black Lives Movement, this year or next year, 2017, will be the 75th anniversary of the U.S. incarceration of Japanese Americans during World War II. And given some of the political rhetoric that we have been hearing, and the idea of incarcerating people for our own safety as being a real way to deal with perceived threats from some people, and some of the dialogue that has happened around that, how do you, from your perspective and the conversations that you have and that you facilitate, how do we really have that conversation around those topics and other topics like that in the way that you're doing in Little Rock, with tough political conversations that are happening that we find ourselves sometimes in the middle of being able to interpret the history while interacting with present day conversations?
But do we have to interpret it, or the people of the community? If it's their stories, they own those stories, why can't we just be the facilitators and afford them that opportunity to have that dialogue? All we have to do is open up that opportunity, present that opportunity for them to have that dialogue in the community and for people to come together. So we don't own the stories. Mm-hmm. And so why can't people that own the stories tell their stories? Mm-hmm. And we provide that opportunity for them to do so.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. We have a question from the audience. I'm going to attempt to unmute Naomi Torres. Naomi, you should be unmuted right now. Can you hear us? All right, that doesn't seem to have worked super successfully. So we have another question from Adrian Leek. Let me find you in the list so I can attempt to unmute you as well. If Elle is on and can help me. There you are. I'm going to mute you. Adrian.
Hi, can you hear me?
Not yet.
Actually, I didn't submit a question, but thank you for asking.
Oh, your hand is raised. That's why.
Oh, I'm sorry. Lower my hand.
That's okay. We have Peggy has also asked one about how you and your staff are doing some of the community work in terms of NPS employees as community assets.
How are we Implementing community work, is that the question?
Yeah, I think so. So how are you going about this, some of the community work you talked about in terms of MPS employees working as community assets?
Well,
And if Peggy is on and we could unmute her, she could probably ask it better than I could.
okay. Peggy? All right, well, I can say that we are a part of the community. Our staff are from the community, and we consider ourselves economic engine of the community, number one. And we try to be as visible as possible, number two. We participate in evening programs, number three. And we also consider ourselves a capstone of the community. So those, number one, we have programs, tours, we have evening programs, we attend community meetings, we have a community garden with Children's Hospital. So we participate as much as possible and try to be as visible, but it's also important for the programs to be community driven, meaning that those programs, relevant programs, belong to the community. This is something that the community wants and the community is participating in. Beyond November came out as a part of the community calling and asking, can I do this? I would like to do this. Can we do this type of program? Can you help us with this? That's how a lot of the programs transpired, especially beyond November. So now with that, we're hosting town hall meetings with community members. The FBI is a part of the community, and they called and asked, could we host a program there? The Veteran Hospital, the VA called and asked, could we host a program there? So we're looking at a program called Yoga, Share Yoga, okay, or Yoga in a Share. So a lot of these programs is because the community feel comfortable with us. They know that we care about them. When we talk about mobilization, these are the programs that the community is mobilizing, and we are looking at, can we do this? And we come together as a group. Decisions are made as a group, not just from the superintendent. So this is community driven, but it's also staff driven. That this employee would like to see this happen, or yes, I would like to take that program. And that's how the programs evolve in our relationship with the community.
Excellent. I think that this is some really good examples of how programs are able to be sustainable when they are developed jointly with the community and the staff. Another side of sort of being a community asset are some of the resources that we're able to bring, and I see Martha Droge is here, and I was wondering, Martha, if you could give us a little bit of an update about some of the competitive grants that are coming out from the LCWF that are specifically targeted to fund local parks in underserved communities, and looking at some of the technical resource or the support side that the Park Service has. I'm going to try to unmute you. Hopefully this works. Martha?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. So yes, as you were mentioning in the community assistance programs, we have just recently closed the application period for $15 million in matching grant money going to local governments and state governments and tribal governments that choose to apply, really targeting improving or creating new parks in underserved urban areas. And this is a second round in 2014. There was the initial competition. This was created by Congress in FY14's budget. And at that time, it was only $3 million. And in that initial round, we awarded, I believe, 8 grants around the country. And this year, Congress has given us a total at this point of $15 million. And we've just now received close to 60 grant applications that we are downloading now from the system. So I believe it'll be just below or at 60 applications from many different states across the country, and a few who had applied the first time around in FY14, and then a few that hadn't applied at all. And these are going to, well, these applications are from, I should say, programs that are, or states rather, that are all over the country, and not every state, but I would say most states have put in some application. So this money will go to fund things like playgrounds, boat launches, baseball fields, Little League fields, restrooms, parking lots, things that support local parks, and it goes to capital projects, even though we know that the need is quite desperate for maintenance and operations money in state and local park systems. This funding, the way that it is attached to the enabling legislation, which is the Land and Water Conservation Fund, it can only go to capital projects for land acquisition or installing or constructing facilities within those local and state parks. And so it's very exciting, and we've just begun processing the grants, but we're sincerely hoping that we can provide some real, demonstrate National Park Service's real commitment to and continuing partnership with urban areas across the country. And I should say that this is a part of the Land and Water Conservation Fund, which has been going on since 1965. And in the last 51 years, the program has funded well over 40,000 grants across the country in 99% of cities and counties across the country to create or improve local parks like baseball fields and skate parks and splash parks and camping grounds and so on. And I guarantee that many of the parks that everyone on this call has grown up using have been funded and created by LWCF money. And so this particular urban grant program focused at urban underserved areas is another chapter in that book, and really a continuation. And as a result, the money carries with it the perpetual protections that come along with LWCF money, meaning that after we fund the picnic area or the soccer field, we put a protection around the park, and we ensure that that park remains a public outdoor recreation resource in perpetuity. And if at any time pieces of it are converted out to some other use, then the grant recipient needs to pay us back by creating new parkland somewhere else. So it's really one half grant funding and then one half almost like a land trust or a conservation easement trust. And so it's a very powerful program and very popular at the local level. And we're just really excited that we have the opportunity to do this, and again to demonstrate that the National Park Service really is in communities all across the country. And you know, it's really exciting in the centennial year to be doing this.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Martha. We do have some follow-up questions for you, Robin, about some of the examples you just shared. I'm going to sort of combine two together. Peggy wanted to follow up and know if your staff wear their uniforms to all these community programs, and if so, how is that received? And Alan Turnbull was wondering if you could comment on some of the built-in difficulty that Park Service employees serving as community assets face when the Park Service culture looks towards rewarding and expects frequent relocations. So staff don't always have a chance to have a good read on community issues or who the unofficial local leaders are.
Okay, I'll start with Peggy. What was Peggy's question again?
Does your staff wear uniforms when they do all these community events?
Yes, they do.
And how's that?
A mixture, but yes, staff wear uniform because we want people to know who we are, the National Park Service, and that we're affiliated with the National Park Service. We're not a museum, so staff wear uniforms all the time at all places. I can't say I wear uniform all the time in all places, but people do know me in the community as well, as far as the Chamber of Commerce, La Rock Convention Bureau. So we have different relationships well, I go to meetings and staff go to meetings, but the bulk of the time we are in uniform.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. And then Alan's question about, we tend to jump around in the Park Service and go from community to community, which can be, make it difficult to tap into real community issues and identify who those unofficial local community leaders are, and sort of your impressions of that inherent challenge that we face.
Well, that is true. One of the things I'm looking to do here is to establish long-term community relationships, but you have to have institutional knowledge here. So if you have staff that's been around a while, you have that institutional knowledge that you could tap into. I'm not afraid to go to my employees and ask them for support or to get information from them, to let them know, look, I'm weak over here, I need your strength over here, you're good with this, so I need your help with this. Number one. Number two, we also have to look at the lack of support from the agency. So sometimes we have to be creative. Sometimes we're out there on our own.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of times we're out there on our own. So with that, we have to look at organizations in the communities that are strong, that are sustainable, that you can develop sustainable partnerships with, relationships with. That's very important because they're going to be there once you leave. You want to leave sustainable programs. But it's very important to tap into the resources that are in the community and tap into the knowledge that's already at the agency. It's very important to tap into that.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. So I think we have time for one last question. I appreciate you guys holding on with us. We're running a little bit over to make up for some of our technical difficulty time. But Marianne Peak, I believe, has a question. Marianne, you should be unmuted now.
You sure? Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, you can? Good. Okay. I just wanted to say thank you for your work, Robin, because you manage an extraordinary resource, and I know that because I had the opportunity to visit there, serving on a committee for the Presidential Sites and Libraries Conference.
Yes.
That meets every 5 years, and we went to Little Rock at the President Clinton library, and we planned a field trip to the high school. And I thought it was an extraordinary opportunity to see that active resource and what it means to the community and the story, and being able to meet a few of the Little Rock 9 and have them tell their story in person. And my question is this, as an extension of that visit, we also planned a trip for some who could go to the National Civil Rights Center that is part of the hotel or motel that Martin Luther King.
The Civil Rights Museum.
Right, the Civil Rights Museum. And those resources together tell a remarkable story, an important one for our country. And I'd like to know, or the audience might like to know, how you work with them, because it looks like to me, you know, a package deal that to see one, you must see the other. And I really like the idea of having the stories being told by the individuals who really lived it and experienced it. And as much as we can capitalize on that today, I think is to our advantage, because you're attracting your community within a circle there, but there's a story that really needs to reach out to the entire United States.
Well, we do have a relationship with the museum, and sometimes when we are hosting programs, we take groups there as well, or groups from there will come here. But also to the Japanese internment camp in Jerome, Arkansas. We have a Japanese internment camp, and so we go there as well. And sometimes we take the teachers from the Civil Rights Institute. We'll take to either one, but we have taken them to both. And then as far as the community, We have a youth leadership program, whereas our youth are involved in making decisions. And they are involved in developing their program. They are a part of this site, very much so, and a part of the decision-making process. One of the things I would like to say is our responsibility for the youth is to prepare them to sit at the decision-making table, because in the future they will be making decisions that will impact us. But it's also important to invest in our employees. We, working together, we show the responsibility to secure employees' needs so that they could reach their full potential. And we could do that working together and actually supporting details with each other. I think that's very important for us to do. And we look at the site, yes, this is a civil rights site, but this is also a story of a people and looking at human rights. And with that, under that umbrella, you're looking at community mobilization. You're looking at impoverished communities. You're looking at education in crisis. You're looking at from the prison to the pipeline, because you're looking at social issues that are impacting the community that's surrounding you. But we cannot do that without, first and foremost, investing in our employees and ensuring that they are skill set. That's very important, and the skills that they need to become a part of that community, an asset of that community. So I think that we have to look at both sides in serving the community and also in serving our employees. I feel very strongly about that. Civic engagement or conscious engagement, that's just a tool applied for community-driven programs. Yes, we want to enrich the lives of the community, but we also want to enrich the lives of our employees as well, so that we could both be effective. We could be effective on both sides in serving the community and in serving our employees, because they're both our constituents.
And I imagine your community sees you as a job opportunity. I hope so.
Well, I'm constantly told, you can't leave, you can't leave. But I think that for us, the National Park Service, that our responsibility, we have a huge responsibility in marshaling the story of our cultures and natural resources, but we are also challenged to respond to the trends in demographics. We're challenged with that. We're challenged with technology, politics, and social values, and also the new age coming in and looking at urban ecosystems. That's another part of being in urban environments and urban communities, looking at urban ecosystems. So our goal is to, offer park rangers a window into the historical transitions from natural and ecosystems. And we're looking at complex environments, social and emotional recovery. Those are the things that we have to address when our employees are transitioning from one environment to another. And I know I keep harping on employees, guys. I know that, but I feel that I feel very strongly about investing in human capital and preparing them. So I use this site as a transition site to train employees and for them to move on. But I'm also looking at establishing institutional knowledge here as well. For when I move on, there will be institutional knowledge here.
Excellent, Robin. Thank you so much for your time today. I think you've given us a lot to think about in terms of the role that parks can play in having real dialogue with communities and how we prepare staff to have those conversations, and some great examples of the work that you're doing. So thank you for spending some time with us. Thank you to everyone who attended and folks who asked questions, and those of you that held on during our technical difficulties and so nicely and exuberantly said yes when you could hear us in the question section, so I appreciate that. If you have ideas of other folks that you'd like to spend a 30-minute coffee chat with, please send them to either myself, Rebecca Stanfield McCown, or L.O. Casey at the Stewardship Institute. As we look to set these up, we'll be looking to see what are the topics that people are interested in, who do folks want to hear from. And we'll make sure some follow up. So if you have other questions for Robin, we can get those to her and keep the conversation going.
All right, and thank you for affording me an opportunity to share with my colleagues.
Absolutely. So glad to have you. Goodbye.
Bye.